This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the Budget and Performance Committee. Can I ask everyone to make sure that your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions? And can I now ask our clerk, Hannah Barlow, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. No apologies received.
Excellent. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any interests to declare?
The issue with the Royal Parks Police will probably come up, and I'm a trustee of the Royal Parks.
Understood. Okay. So we now leap spryly to item 8, which is the 2025-26 final draft consolidated budget, which is our main item of business this morning, a discussion focusing on the 2025-26 GLA final draft consolidated budget. This meeting will focus on a discussion with the Mayor on any changes to his budget proposals following the publication of his final draft consolidated budget. I've said draft consolidated budget too many times already. So I'd like to welcome our guest this morning. We have Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. Good morning. We have David Bellamy, the Mayor's Chief of Staff. Good morning, David. And Chief Finance Officer of the GLA, Faye Hammond. Good morning. So if I can kick off, Mr. Mayor, just very conscious of time. Obviously, one of the biggest changes is about police funding, and this has been a big discussion throughout this budget process. So in your final budget that is now before us, the 25-26 MOPAC budget, where does that leave us in terms of changes to police officer numbers?
Thanks, Chair. So since the January publication, we've managed to secure an additional £83 million towards MOPAC's budget, some of that from council tax, a lot of that from Home Office and government. So that's narrowed the gap. The Met Police Service and MOPAC are currently working through, you'll be familiar with the Tough Choices document that the Commissioner very helpfully prepared back in November-ish. So they're going through that. What the Commissioner's confirmed he'll be doing is, when it comes to prioritising where the additional money goes, rather than salami slicing each of the tough choices by an equal percentage, he'll be prioritising neighbourhood policing, public protection and responses, and I'm sure as we speak the Met Police are working through those figures now, and I'm hoping we're able to publish the MOPAC budget next month.
Okay, but it is still it's a net loss of police officers to the coming year.
I should explain a bigger point. So I didn't really understand your question. So the Commissioner set up back in the London Police Board, I think it was November, and forgive me if it was October, there was a gap of £450 million. We've managed to, in the course of levers we have at City Hall, but also lobbying the government, managed to raise an additional, for this year, £320 million compared to last year. There is still a gap. The gap's a bit bigger than you'd assume. The gap's only, it's only 130. It's a bit bigger because the Met Police, in their wisdom, already factored in borrowing for capital and so forth. So there's still a gap, a delta, and so there will need to be tough choices made. Some of that will inevitably lead to, I'm afraid, police officer numbers being
400. That's our estimate.
We've not got recently. That's why it's best not to give figures. It moved once in January and once now.
Yeah. So what you see in the final draft budget, MOPAC have published a note so that we can be clear. That shows an officer strength at the end of March 26 of 30,973. But that is very much not the final position because, as the Mayor said, we've secured this extra £83 million and the process is ongoing at the moment to work out how to use that to ameliorate these tough choices. And so, there will be a further improvement in the position, and we're waiting, just like the committee, to find out what that would be.
Okay, so further improvement now, but the year ahead is fewer police officers than the year just currently underway.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, Assembly Member Hall.
Well, that's very disappointing, Sadiq, because I'm sure you'll agree, because you told us if we had a Labour government, everything in the world would be rosy. And to have less police officers is not what Londoners want, is it?
Let me deal with the various points raised in your question. So this year, we will have more money going to the Met Police Service than any year since the Met Police was founded 196 years ago, thanks to the Labour government's generosity. The Labour government has given us this year alone, the Home Office, more than £280 million in cash. That's 6 times more than the 14 years before given by the previous Conservative government. The reason for the shortfall is the £1.1 billion cuts over the last 14 years. The good news is, notwithstanding what my Chief of Staff has said, that we'll still have more officers than we had when I first became Mayor.
Well, you very conveniently forget to mention that millions of pounds in the uplift is actually to pay for this national insurance that has been hoisted upon all employers, but I'm sure we'll come back to that later. So if we're looking at the tough decisions, you must have spoken to the Commissioner. What is actually going to go? Because Londoners want to know.
Well, the good news is we've got some experience of national insurance hikes. It's happened twice before, 14 years. Once in 2011, 2012, and once in 2022, 2023.
Mr. Mayor, can we, since you have cut this meeting down and have refused to see us for longer than an hour, which I think is a damn disgrace, can you actually answer the specific questions I'm putting to you? What now is going to be cut? What are we not going to be seeing? Flying squad, the dog unit, the horse unit? Well, what are we not going to be seeing?
Well, firstly, to clarify, Chair, I'm the first mayor again to a Budget and Performance Committee, unlike any previous mayor. So it's not the case. I have less scrutiny than any previous mayor. I have more scrutiny than any previous mayor, which is why I'm here voluntarily at a Budget and Performance Committee meeting after the publication of the final draft budget. The second point I'd make is this is my third commissioner. All 3 commissioners have had to make tough choices over the last 8 years. The good news is this commission is in a better place than previous commissioners because of the investment from the government and City Hall. The bad news is there are only so many changes you can make after cuts of £1.1 billion. I think it's unwise to give a running commentary on what choices the commissioner is going to make. I respect his operational expertise and the work he's doing to try and ameliorate the consequences of 14 years of austerity.
Well, I can only imagine you don't know, which is shocking, bearing in mind you're the Police and Crime Commissioner. And can you please bear in mind you've been over 8 years, and look at where we are. We're promised an extra 1,300 officers on our streets, and let's face it, all we're looking at now is reduced numbers. I'll leave it there because the Mayor is leaving early. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just on the extra 1,300 officers that you committed to, when do you think we'll see those?
Well, the promise was for 1,300 additional police officers, PCNOs and specials, and it's my understanding is the mayoral term is 4 years.
So by the end of those, that's an over 4 years commitment. Understood. Assemblymember Roberts, did you want to come in?
Thank you. Good morning. Just touching on the tough choices list, what's your understanding of the savings which will be made against each of the tough choices?
Yeah, it's not. It's a point I alluded to in the past. It's not an equal salami slicing of each of the tough choices. Some will be more than others because the priorities are neighbourhood police and public protection responses. So I can't give you a figure for each of those tough choices because that's the work that Commissioner is doing right now.
Mm-hmm. But there must be a figure attached to, say, the Royal Parks Police, because that's not going to be salami sliced in this. That's going to go in its entirety.
Yeah.
So how much will be saved on the Royal Parks?
There's a question you asked the Commissioner when he was here, and I'll give the same answer as him. He's not to give running commentary, and that work's taking place, and once he's done the work, we'll make sure it's given to the Assembly as well.
Do you not think that in order for us to do a proper job of scrutinising this budget and scrutinising the spend which is going to come through, and as you said, there is additional amounts of money which seem to be coming through all the time, that we really should have that level of information so that we can properly scrutinise the decisions being taken?
Well, let me do an important point you raise. Additional money coming through all the time.
Yes.
Maybe you can explain what that means.
Well, we've heard from you earlier at the last mayoral question time that you said there was additional money coming through, and you said, I think, four times than you had under the previous 14 years. I'm not arguing with that. I'm saying that what we're seeing is we seem to be getting an additional amount of money coming through on a regular basis. We've just seen an extra 83 million. And what we are here to do is to try to find out whether the decisions being taken on behalf of Londoners are the right decisions. So if there's an extra £83 million, we might be able to say, are you going to save this particular unit? Are you going to take the axe away from that part of that particular unit? We cannot do that job unless we have the detail.
Well, I think what you're saying is that our lobbying's paid off in relation to the Home
I'm not
Office.
complaining about the money that you're getting. I think it's a good thing and I support it. What I would like to know is how it's going to be used.
Thank you to this Home Secretary when it comes to additional money to
But you're not dealing with the Conservatives.
Right. So, to deal with your point, we have set out, MOPAC set out, in parallel with the budget documents earlier this week, detail on what the tough choices as it stands within the final draft budget.
Yeah.
Now, as you said, there's an extra £83 million. We're going through the process at the moment of working out how that, how best to use that money, how we can ameliorate those tough choices, and when that is done, we will set it out in the MOPAC budget, and we will set out the financial information that goes with that, and then that can be scrutinised. At the moment, not only can't you scrutinise how that £83 million will be used, but we're not yet at the point where we can discuss it with the Commissioner because they're still doing that work.
Okay, one final question, if I may, Chair. Are there any tough choices which you will veto if the Metropolitan Police Commissioner comes to you with that?
It doesn't work like that. The way it works is we work collegially with the Commissioner, respecting his expertise and Operation Independence. He is cognizant of the Police and Crime Plan, which is the legal basis of inverted commas veto, your words, not mine. It's never come to that in the last 8 years, and I don't envisage it coming to that in this budget either.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you, Chair. So just going back to this £280 million figure, so I'm looking at the gap, which you said is about 130 million as well. So without that 280, we were probably looking at a budget gap of about 410 million.
It's more than that, because don't forget there are some of the Assembly who don't want me to raise council tax. And so it's really important to remind ourselves the previous mayor didn't raise council tax to the police precept. We are about £500 million worse off because of the previous mayor's decision, which incidentally is the size of the black hole. So what I've done is to use the levers at my disposal, unlike the previous mayor. That's brought in council tax for the police before January, and because the base rate grew by more than 2% rather than 1%, we've got an additional £10 million for the police. According to some of the Assembly, I shouldn't be doing that, so that's money we otherwise wouldn't get. Additionally, we've managed to secure £22 million for neighbourhood policing, and additionally, because of our lobbying, and I'm really grateful to the Home Secretary, we've got £50 million, which is one-off. Now, the challenge of one-off money is you've got to be really careful about using it for recurring expenditure. And so when the Chief of Staff was alluding to the hard work that Met Police are doing, is those are some of the considerations that are going to take in place. How to use a one-off sum of money without the guarantees we'll get it in future years. But it's great news. We managed to have additional £83 million from January, last year versus this year, an additional £320 million over the last 196 years. Never has the Met Police got that much money in 1 year, and I'm grateful to this government.
Thank you. And just to probe a bit more on the International Capital Cities grant. So obviously we welcome the 33% increase in this year alone, and the Commissioner has also prioritised neighbourhood policing as well. I just want to try to work out in sort of practical terms what that means for neighbourhood policing. Does it mean that We're having less extractions going to Central London, which means although it's not a sort of budget increase in terms of neighbourhood policing terms, it is a knock-on impact. I'm trying to work out what it means for local communities.
No, it's a really important point you raised. And it's actually an operational point, which is just worth explaining. But it's 34.2% increase in NIC funding. 1.2% is a lot of money. What it means is, you're right, less abstractions, but also it means that the Commissioner, using the basic command unit, can have officers on the streets and the front line. So additional NIC money means, rather than ensuring that you've got officers from all 12 BCUs being put aside to go into the centre of our city for a variety of events, there are fewer abstractions being made, things like 12-hour shifts, leave being cancelled and so forth, which takes fatigue later on. And there are a couple of other examples of where operationally the Met Police are deciding to reduce some specialist functions. Schools officers is one example. The Met Police has analysed, for example, where the most personal thefts and personal robberies take place on mobile phones. They tend to be after school hours, outside schools. So what the Met Police are doing is saying, hold on a sec, why don't you use those officers, rather than being inside schools, outside schools? That's an operational decision rather than because of pounds and pence. And I know Gareth Roberts is very concerned about parks policing, for good reasons, I understand. Another consideration the Met Police are doing is there a possibility of neighbourhood police officers doing some of the functions of Royal Parks, but similarly Royal Parks doing some of the functions traditionally of neighbourhood officers. But you're right, the additional £63.4 million for NIC will lead to improvements in your communities in Harrow and Brent.
Thanks. Actually, just before we move on, you made this points a couple of times, Mr. Mayor, about what you characterise as the failure to increase council tax precept previously. So I think if that had happened, I think Londoners would be paying right now about £150 extra per year. So your contention is that Londoners have got it in their pockets to pay on average about £150 a year extra, and you think that that should have been done?
That's not the case. I think I'm not sure.
That's my calculation based on what you just said.
I'm not sure if you're talking about cumulatively or this year. It is not the case that Londoners this year will be paying £150 more. It is the case that because of the previous mayor's decision, the Met Police Service receives less money than they otherwise would.
Right, so your contention is, though, that the decision of the previous mayor to hold council tax low was a mistake. You think he should have put it up every single year, and if he had done that, and if you had continued to do that, which is the implication of your insistence that that must be done, I think that would be about an extra £150 on the Band D council tax precept, I think, for a Londoner. That's what you're arguing, because you're saying the police would get the money. It doesn't come out of thin air, it comes out of Londoners' pockets. You're saying Londoners should pay an extra £150 a year.
Well, I'm really grateful we have a dividing line now. Tories who want to cut Met Police funding, Labour who want to invest in Met Police funding, the Party of Law and Order cutting funding from the Met
so you're ranting,
Police
you're ranting,
Service.
Mr. Mayor.
The Party of Law and Order wanting to reduce the ability of our police officers to do a hard
fair question, not
job.
And
you know,
prompt for a rant.
we now know. We now know. And you can be abusive as the chair, but we now know the facts.
I don't think anything that I said was abusive, Mr. Mayor. I resent that implication. I asked you if the logic of your position is that Londoners should be paying another £150 a year on their council tax to fund police. That seems to be what you're saying. Is that what you agree with?
Well, let me be quite clear what I said in response to your assertion as the chair, the impartial chair of this committee. Every year I've been mayor, I've used all the levers at my disposal to maximise funding for the Met Police Service. The previous mayor had levers at his disposal to support the police, and he failed to do so. Londoners have chosen my path 3 times because they support our police receiving funding. We have crocodile tears from some people in this assembly claiming we should be funding the police more without explaining how they would do so. I've explained how I would do so. One, lobby this new fantastic government, £280 million additional funding this year from them, 6 times more than the previous 14 years under 5 Home Secretaries. Secondly, the levers at my disposal, which is council tax.
Yeah, and I think the implication of what you've said is that you think Londoners should be paying a lot more council tax, I think. So that takes us on to our next section, which is London Fire Brigade. Assembly Member Clark.
Good morning. Good morning, Sadiq. Coming on to the London Fire Brigade, how is the LFB going to address the 9.6 million of savings to be identified in the 25-26 budget?
One of the consequences of the previous mayor not using the levers at his disposal is the fire brigade received less money during his tenure than they should have done, but also we're paying the price now because the base is lower. So not using the levers at his disposal led to fire stations closing down, fire appliances being lost, firefighter jobs being lost. And actually, when you look at some of the explanation for what happened at Grenfell Tower and a couple of other examples, you see the consequences of lack of funding from the previous mayor. What I've done since I've been mayor is to fund the fire brigade at record levels. According to the previous Home Office, prior to the change of government, we were overfunding the London Fire Brigade, in their words, by the tune of £20 million each year. So what I've done is not just support the fire brigade in my previous draft budget, but because the council tax base rate was a bit higher, the additional money raised, every penny's gone to either the Met Police Service or the London Fire Brigade. And what we've managed to do is close the gap that we had in the fire brigade. You'll be aware we had two big concerns in relation to the fire brigade going forward. One was the gap of £12.7 million, and there was an issue in relation to national insurance. We've managed to close that gap, so the budget is balanced. And to give the Commissioner credit, he himself, though, during the course of the year, notwithstanding our support, is going to find efficiencies of more than £22 million. So they're tightening their belt, but they've reassured us none of those efficiencies will be frontline. So fire stations, fire engines, firefighters protected, but they'll find efficiencies elsewhere to make sure we have a balanced budget at the end of the year as well as the beginning.
Thank you for that. I think one thing that I always recognise when I speak with firefighters and visit fire stations across the city is it's notable that fire stations haven't been closed under your mayoralty. We haven't lost appliances, and yet you've transformed the culture of the brigade with the Commissioner as well, and that's outstanding. Thank you very much, and thank you for protecting their funding.
Assemblymember Roberts, I think you had a question on fire.
Thank you, yes. Just regarding firefighter training programmes that are not currently funded beyond the next financial year, I appreciate we have this year by year by year. But would you be able to give any indication of how you will be funding firefighter training, given the importance placed on it by the Commissioner post-Grenfell?
Yeah, cracking question. So there's two things. At the moment, the fire brigades with two government departments is really confusing. It's with Home Office and MHCLG, which just makes lobbying a nightmare, but also we can move pillar to post between these two departments. What will happen going forward is there'll be one department in charge of the fire brigade, MHCLG, which makes life easier. We also have coming up in June a comprehensive spending review. We're quite clear in relation to our ask of the government. They must invest in training. You'll be aware our firefighters are doing more and more and more building inspections, for example, floods, marine terrorists and so forth. So we've got to invest in training, and Anne Clark referred to cultural change. A lot of that is training, and so you're right to remind me of the importance of lobbying for that. And I can assure you, training is an integral part of being a modern firefighter and, dare I say, a modern police officer as well.
Thank you. That concludes our section on fire. We move on to Transport for London. Assemblymember Georgiou.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Since the consultation budget was published, a new line appeared in the first draft consolidated budget for TfL 25-26, budget of NI funding required of the £35 million. This does not appear in the final draft consolidated budget. What was the source of funding? And perhaps you want to look to either people either side of you to help answer.
You're a generous man, thank you. I'm going to go for the last line.
That's all right.
Okay. So the cost of the additional national insurance payments, £12.1 million was met from the grant that the government provided, and the balance is going to be delivered by TfL through savings as they work and put together their final budget. And that shows at the moment in the budget documents as saving against London Underground staffing, where we have significantly reduced costs going into next year because of the progress made on the costs of the pension scheme.
So thank you very much, David. So, Mr. Mayor, by our calculations, looking at the current budget that we have in front of us, so £44 million is effectively not being funded by the government for the NI increase. Of that, 35 million is for TfL. David, you can shake your head, but this is what we've got in front of us. So if you want to tell me why I'm wrong, be my guest. So
that we're clear, we estimated the cost, excluding MOPAC, where that was fully funded within the police settlement. So
I didn't ask about MOPAC.
Yeah, I know you didn't. I'm just being clear. For the rest of the GLA group, we estimated the cost at around £44 million, and the government provided a national insurance grant of £18.8 million. So the shortfall's about 25 million, not the much bigger figure you use.
Okay, well, that's what we had in front of us. So even if we take £25 million, which is still a very large number, we had TfL in front of us, we've had Faye in front of us, and Faye can defend herself after I'm done, saying, oh, all of it's going to be funded, it's all fine. So that's been covered for MOPAC, happy and wonderful, but the rest of the GLA family and TfL have not had those national insurance contribution increases fully funded. So what's happened?
So, I mean, clearly the government has not provided as much money as we would have hoped for that cost, which I think there's clearly an issue, and we've spoken to the government about this and they understand it, that the model they used for allocating funding was very much based on a local authority view of the world, where local authorities tend to have relatively restricted sources of income other than council tax and business rates. Whereas with Transport for London, it clearly has billions of pounds worth of income from fares, and that didn't factor into the government's formula. And so that's just it will affect transport authorities across the country as well. It's just the decision the government took on how to assign the available funding was one that really was focused on prioritising the needs of local councils, which
David,
possibly you can understand given the challenges many of them face.
Right, and I hear what you said, and effectively what you've conceded is the government's done over the GLA family, with the exception of MOPAC and the Met. I'll give them credit where credit's due. But, you're saying they're using a local government formula, treating us as they would a London borough. Well, that's not the case, because they've shafted a lot of London boroughs as well. So, quite frankly, I hear what you're saying, so I'd address to you, Mr. Mayor. Clearly, they're your good friends in government. You've achieved some of what you wanted to achieve with particular police funding, but as I say, we've already been down that road already. Will you be saying, because look, this will be over 40, 50 million pound for some departments, an ongoing cost going into next year, which, by the sounds of it, we may not pick up in the multi-year settlement. So you're going to say, can you fully fund these increases going forward?
I suspect the same civil servants involved this year in the budget were involved in the government budgets of 2011, 2012 and 2022, 2023, when the previous government increased employer contribution for national insurance. The good news is we've managed to get 100% funding from the government for the Met Police Service, 100% for the GLA, 100% for LLDC, 100% for OPDC, around 2/3 for the Fire Brigade, and about a third for TfL. And we've managed to, as I said in answer to Anne Clark's question, find the money for the other third for the LFB. TfL will find the other 2/3 for their national insurance contribution in the way that David has said. And the context is, TfL, for the first time in its history, is now running an operating surplus 2 years in a row, and that happened since I became mayor.
Mr. Mayor, with the greatest respect, as David's conceded, £25 million outstanding, not found by the government to give to you, and this is a Labour government. And I'd also say that this is an ongoing thing that, from what you've just said, sounds like it won't be funded going into next year. So that's an extra £80 million we're going to have to find across the family. But I'll leave it there, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your responses.
Thank you. Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. So, one of the previous committees, Mayor, we had Rachel McLean along, the CFO for TfL, and she'd said at the meeting that it's definitely seen greater sensitivity in prices for bus and tram usage. In response that we've had since the meeting, we saw that fares freezes on buses equals extra demand. What that means in terms of a 5p increase, we would have been losing 12.4 million extra journeys that we've got at the moment. If it was a 10p increase, it would have been a 26.4 million extra journeys that we're losing. How important, Mr. Mayor, is it that we are freezing fares on buses for lower income Londoners?
Just like raising council tax to support our police is a political choice I've made, freezing fares is a choice I've made. It's the 6th year now I've frozen bus fares and tram fares, criticised by some for doing so. What it means is not simply we get more people using our buses, compare and contrast other parts of the country where bus fares have gone up and bus usage has gone down, but actually it's the poorest Londoners who use buses the most and trams the most. Sometimes some in this assembly claim they care about Outer London. Those in Outer London use buses and trams the most. Trams only exist in Outer London. So I'm grateful for your recognition of the difference this budget will make. We'll have to wait and see whether all members of the Assembly vote for bus and tram fares freezes or some vote against that.
Absolutely, Mayor. So you referred earlier to the operating surplus that has now been achieved at TfL for 2 years in a row under your leadership. You've secured almost double the amount of capital investment in TfL from the government. You're introducing Superloop 2. You've announced the Bakerloop line as well. You're making more stations step-free. You're introducing a new toilet and renovation programme across London. We're getting new trains on the Piccadilly and DLR in the next year. And you're expanding the fleet of green buses, all whilst delivering on your pledge to freeze bus fares. Where else are you going forward in terms of your achievement, your ambition for TfL?
The real prize for us is the integrated settlement. We need a comprehensive plan going forward for our capital expenditure. And so you've set out some of our achievements over the last 8 years, and I think TfL have worked incredibly hard, including all those workers who work incredibly hard for TfL, some of whom lost their lives during the pandemic. What we need, though, is long-term stability. You look at the Highways Agency, Network Rail, many of the transport authorities across London, they've got 3-year deals or 5-year deals, some even 10-year deals. That's the sort of stability we need, because it means that we can get value for money. We can also plan long-term going forward. I've got aspirations for, as you said, Superloop 2, Bakerloop, but also a Bakerloop extension down south, or West London Orbital, which will really affect your community for the better. The DLR being extended to Thamesmead. We can point to examples of progress we've made: Elizabeth Line, Northern Line extension, Barking Riverside extension, Superloop 1. We could do even more with that long-term capital settlement.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Somebody Member Hall, I think you indicated.
Yeah, very, very briefly. You were saying earlier that if Boris hadn't frozen council tax, then there'd be a lot more money, and yet you freeze fares. If you hadn't done that, there'd be an extra £1 billion in TfL. So I really think you ought to think whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's obviously bad when the Tories do it, when Boris got things right. You've got to stop going on about things that happened nearly 9 years ago, Mr. Mayor, and start taking responsibility. And since it's been brought up in this section, do you feel sorry for all the thousands and thousands of businesses in London who are going to have to find this employer's national insurance? They can't rely on the government to give them the money. Do you feel sorry for them, and do you apologise to them for having a rotten Labour government that is costing businesses a fortune?
Well, Chair, I'm sure you'll give me the latitude to deal with the 7 points raised in that question by Assembly Member Hall. Firstly, we have found the one person that's still
just said, do you feel sorry for them?
We found one person that's still a fan of Boris Johnson.
Yes, you have actually.
And let's deal with fares between 2008 and 2016. Fares in TfL went up by 42%. 42% between 2008 and 2016. Since I've been Mayor, compared to inflation, they're 21% less. On buses, they're 22% less than they would be if they went up by just inflation. God knows what they'd have gone up by if, heaven forbid, Boris Johnson was Mayor.
Well, he'd be doing a better job than you are, Mr. Mayor. Can you just answer that? Would you like to say sorry to all the businesses in London who are going to have to lay off staff, that's Londoners, because of this national insurance employment hike? Would you like to do that briefly, because you're letting us only have an hour of your precious time?
Each year between 2008 and 2016, like-for-like operating costs TfL went up. It's only since 2016 the like-for-like operating costs have gone down. And what's really important is those businesses want a good public transport system in London, which is what we are providing. I can't run away from the fact, though, that one of the inheritances of the new government is a black hole to the tune of £22 billion. And there's two ways to fill a black hole. You either raise more revenues or you make cuts. And what the government's going to do is both of those things to make the books balance. And we know, though, it is possible to run a good public transport system, as we do with TfL, at the same time as providing good value for money and also reducing fares.
OK, so you won't say sorry to all those businesses that are going to have to lay off staff. Thank you, Chairman.
Assemblymember Georgiou.
I think just exploring the questioning between you and Assemblymember Hall, Mr Mayor, that the point is that you moaned, effectively, you couldn't take an extra £500 million out of Londoners' pockets via your precept, or your many precepts, as you like to say. But then when you froze fares, which everybody loves paying less for transport, we're not getting into a political debate about that, but the point is, it's the principle of the thing. The current rolling stock is crippled because you've frozen fares, and then you moan because you haven't increased the fares that the government didn't give you the money. You can't have it both ways, can you?
Well, let me deal with both those points. The reason why our stock is crippling is because the Conservative government in 2015 reduced to zero operating grant and gave us one-year capital deals. Secondly, the fares freeze between 2008 and 2016 were paid for by efficiencies made by TfL. The fares freeze since then, I beg your pardon, between 2016 and if only there'd been a fare freeze between 2008 and 2016. The fares freeze between 2016 and 2021 was paid for by efficiencies. The fares freeze since was paid for by City Hall. We give TfL every year money towards that, which supports hard-working families in London, including businesses. And this idea that you punish fare payers by increasing every year above inflation fares, like Boris Johnson did, as a good thing, doesn't work, because we've seen across the country passenger numbers going down in public transport. In London, on buses, they've gone up.
Yeah, I should have bought you a calculator for Christmas because, quite frankly, yes, I concede the fact that you funded it from the GLA, but imagine if you'd funded it from the GLA and increased fares and not moaned that the government hadn't given you the money. You would have had £1 billion extra in TfL to improve the rolling stock. Well, that's just a fact. I'm
really grateful. We now know they're against additional police investment. They're against the fares freeze. I mean, we're getting more and more dividing lines every time they open their mouth. It's great.
It's all right. He makes it up. Thank God he's only here for now, because he makes it up as he goes along. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I just clarify, Mr. Mayor, you've spoken about the virtues of freezing fares and the problems for Londoners of above-inflation fares increases. So on the rest of the TfL network, the Labour government has compelled you to increase them by 4.6%, which I believe is a solid percentage point above inflation. Is that correct?
I hope you give me a chance to answer the question. So the TfL business plan said that we would increase fares by 3.6% across the piece on TfL, published months ago. What's happened is I've chosen to raise tube and train fares by the same as National Rail, 4.6%, but freeze them for buses and trams at 0%. That comes to an average of, guess what, 3.6%. So the business plan and what we're putting forward now is exactly the same. At the same time, we've managed to almost double the amount of capital funds TfL receives for 25-26. I call that a win-win.
Yes, I call that definitely not answering my question. The Labour government compelled you to increase rail fares by 4.6%, didn't they, on pain of less funding in future years? You've previously made that statement yourself publicly.
I think the chair's mistaken the current government for Grant Shapps, and we've published that from Grant Shapps and also published a letter from Louise Hay.
Can I just be clear then? So the government did not require you to increase TfL rail fares by 4.6%. Is that correct?
They did not.
Sorry, I was asking the question to the Mayor. I mean, presumably he knows what the government did or did not compel him to do. Did they require you to increase TfL rail fares this year by 4.6%?
I'm quite clear that what I'm doing is what I said in my business plan, which is across the piece 3.6% increase. And one of the reasons why I'm raising...
Okay, I did ask you a yes-no question. So yes, no, did the government require you to increase rail fares by 4.6%?
Well, I'm afraid you can't subscribe how I answer a question I'm asked by even the chair, the impartial chair. Let me address the question asked by the impartial chair.
Londoners can listen to your answer, and they can think that if I ask you a straight... So you've tried to imply that they didn't require you, so I've asked you a straight question. Did they, yes or no, require you? And if you then choose not to answer that question, Londoners might draw their own conclusion, might they? So for the third time, did the Labour government require you to increase TfL rail fares by 4.6% this year?
Look, just like you can't dictate how I answer the question, you can't answer the question for me. So let me be quite clear. In the past, transport secretaries have tried to dictate to me what I do with fares, and I've said no, because it's I have the power to decide what happens with fares. And in the past, what I've done is said no to the previous government. This year, what the government said in the letter, which we've published for full transparency, I'm really surprised the chair's not read the letter. I'll publish it again today, so you can read the letter. Can we actually send a letter to the...
I can read it out.
Please, yeah, can you do it? Yeah, thank you.
To be fair, so I haven't asked you to read out the letter. I've asked you 3 times, yes or no, whether the government compelled you to increase fares, and you have declined.
I'll tell you
have declined.
what the
Excuse me,
government said.
excuse me. If you forgive me, Mr. Bellamy, the mayor has declined 3 times to answer my question, and since he has only deigned to give us 1 hour of his time, I think we do need to move on. Assemblymember Mahfouz, you want to
He doesn't want me to read out the answer. He doesn't want me to read out the question, does he? He doesn't like it, does he? He doesn't like it. He doesn't like it.
I think that's the sound of a cock crowing there. But so in terms of, I think look, the chair is very well aware that actually we have raised this question about price sensitivity on tube and bus fares, and that was why I asked right at the very start in terms of the impact, because actually we've had Andy Lord as the Chief Operating Officer, we've had Rachel McLean as the Chief Financial Officer, and we've had the Deputy Mayor all talk about the difference in terms of price sensitivity between bus fares, which impact on the lowest income members of across London, versus tube fares. And so in terms of if we had a cake to give it to them so they could have it and eat it. On the one hand, we had Tories saying that you should be increasing fares, and on the other hand, saying that you shouldn't be increasing fares. Really, not knowing what position they want to take on it. I think Londoners are very happy to know that you're being very clear.
Hold on.
And actually, so the figures we had were, if you wanted to take that line, was that 26.4 million less journeys would have been made by the poorest Londoners on just a 10p increase. Actually, if you'd gone Boris's route, it would have been more like a 25p increase. What Londoners want to know is, are you going to stick to your guns and make sure that you freeze fares?
I can answer that in one word, yes.
Oh, amazing. You answer them with one word.
I make no further comments. So we now move on to our section on the GLA Mayor budget. Assemblymember Polanski.
Good morning, everyone. Could I ask about the mandates? So when will you be releasing the delivery plans that support your mandates?
We've published most of them. I'll let David set out. This goes with best performance of how organisations should run. That's why we decided to go around this route. David, do you want to set up?
Cool. Morning, Assembly Member. So, as the committee were aware, we've published most of the programme mandates, which just formalise the Mayor's expectations of the GLA's delivery. What we are now looking at is, indeed, Faye and I were speaking about this only yesterday. We are looking at putting together the GLA Mayor budget and how we then set out the spend on each programme there. And that will align with the delivery plan for each area, which will be approved by mayoral decision. So that's the process we are going through. There has been a lot of work going on into the detailed contents that will feed up into those delivery plans. And when I spoke to the Chief Officer last night, she said that some of that would be coming to me soon. And so what you will see is a GLA Mayor budget in March that sets out the spend for each programme, and then subsequent to that a series of delivery plan decisions from the Mayor approving how that will be used in detail.
Thanks. And when will the targets for those outcome indicators within those delivery plans be published?
I expect the high-level targets to be set out in the delivery plan decision. That's my understanding of what we're doing.
Thanks. And the ones that aren't high-level targets, so if we're going to get into the detail, will those also be published?
So that will, we will look at how best, we report things. So we publish a load of performance data in any case. So things like our affordable housing statistics, which we publish independently anyway. And so we'll continue to do that. And what it's about doing is saying, well, right, what are the right, progress measures against the high-level outcomes we're trying to achieve for London, and then what are the performance measures against the individual programmes in terms of what they're trying to achieve to move the dial on those big numbers. And so, it's how we set all that out. As I say, I haven't seen the kind of proposal from officers and how we do that, so I can't be massively specific at the moment, but that's the broad intent of the approach.
Just to reassure you, Zach, there'll be no surprises. The mandate simply put the manifesto into action. So if you want to see what the KPIs are, the manifesto will set out what the promise they made to Londoners were, and the mandate basically instructs the GLA family to action those manifesto promises.
Makes sense. So essentially you have the mandates, you have the delivery plans for the mandates, and then there'll be targets that are published that meet those delivery plans for the mandates from manifesto. Spot on.
Which flow from the manifesto?
That makes sense. Is that intended to be published for the public?
So the delivery plans will be we're taken by mayoral decision, and thus will be published just in the normal way all mayoral decisions are.
And it's also a useful internal device for, I say it's not in any judging way, for staff to know what expectations are, which is to implement the manifesto.
Yeah, makes sense. So can I take an example? So here we've got an outcome which is Londoners can enjoy green and wild spaces across the capital. Definitely support that. And then we've got percentage of Londoners who agree that they feel part of nature. Will there be an interim target, or is this a case of by 2028, the next mayoral election, it should have increased X percent?
So it's well, sometimes you can get a very clear relationship between what a programme delivers and the outcome. Yeah. So, like for instance, you might be able to get a very clear if the outcome is, right, no Londoners are homeless. Well, you can get a very clear if you have a programme that is then helping Londoners off the street. You only say, all right, we've helped more Londoners off the street. You can see the direct linkage to do that. Yeah. Other programmes, it's a little more, complicated than that, and you can't necessarily see the draft linkage. So one of the things we'll be trying to articulate in the delivery plans is essentially a theory of change, which is saying, well, look, right, we think, well, if we do this, then this will, it will help. But we have to recognise that our contributions are only part of what will have an impact. And clearly, if you're talking about climate-related things, there's a finite amount of impact the measures we take can have compared with, the other pressures and factors that impact our climate. And so, again, that's why I want to try and ensure the delivery plan set this out clearly so that we can see, what we're actually trying to achieve and see that, right, it is helping to move London in the direction we all want to see the city go in, but we have to be realistic that, in a lot of areas, we don't have a lever that we can pull to achieve the high-level goals.
I agree with all of that. Still the same question, though. Will there be interim targets? Because presumably by 2026, for instance, just to throw a date out there, we'll want to go, is what we think can influence, not control those targets, but the influence, is it working? And if it's working, let's do more of it. If it's not working, then it's time for a conversation.
So it's absolutely, I want to see the programmes be agile in their approach and, try things. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster has talked about this for national government as well, and try things, and learn from that and evolve. And, it's clearly not the case that one wants to set a longer term target and then, wake up the week before and go, hang on, we've got a big gap here. So, the programme needs to think about how it is articulating its progress towards what it's ultimately trying to deliver and whether it's on track. I'm sure that approach will be different for different types of things, but that is, I think we're on the same page in terms of the thinking we want to have there.
Mostly on the same page.
Okay.
Agility for you as a team is something I totally support, but for us to scrutinise, agility as a team just looks like a lack of transparency if suddenly there's a big move to something else and we don't have those interim targets. So having those interim targets both helps us to scrutinise you, but actually, arguably more important, it helps Londoners because it means the decisions that are made are the ones that are going towards the targets, and everyone can see that.
Yeah, and so absolutely, it's working out what are sensible, targets and being transparent about how delivery is going, and I'm hopeful that over the next year or so we will be able to build new ways of actually showing that, and with graphs and more interactive ways that people can understand what's happening, and that will help our oversight of delivery, and it will help the Assembly's scrutiny of it.
Thank you. Hopeful about interim targets is slightly different to committing to interim targets, but we'll carry on this conversation. Mr. Mayor, if I can just return to you finally. The last budget meeting, you said that food growing was a priority for you. Because we're talking about high-level targets, some of these kind of cross-cutting issues like food, which is health, environment, etc., economy, could get lost if we don't look at these smaller programs. Have you got an approach to make sure food growing particularly, but, you know, I could say toilets as well. Caroline Russell would be very happy I brought toilets into the meeting. But anything that's cross-cutting.
You raise a good point, and let me take that away, because I'm worried about the smaller things, inverted commas, smaller things being lost with the bigger things. Can I take that away and come back to you directly in relation to how I'm going to reassure myself and then reassure Londoners through you that we're not forgetting the inverted commas smaller stuff. Let me take that away and come back to you.
Particularly, and could we do that in the context of food growing?
No, I get the point. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Can I endorse the point about interim targets as well? Because obviously, while from your point of view that looks like flexibility, what it might look like from our point of view, as Assemblyman Polanski has said, is you set yourself a 4-year target and then lots of things happen in those 4 years and you can claim all the way along the line that you're still on track. Not to harp on about it, but obviously the police target of extra 1,300 officers, if in year 1, as is agreed, the number goes down, you have to start increasing before you can even get to a net gain over the 4 years. So understanding where we are, even just midterm after 2 years, I think that ought to be more than a hope, it ought to be a commitment.
Yeah, so I think that the fundamental point about saying, yes, we want to, we don't, as I said, we don't want to be waking up the week before a target and going, oh, we're off track. You need to be monitoring it all the way and say, is it on track? And we know that for some things, progress is a fairly linear matter. Other times it's not, and things come together at the end. And it's how you reflect that and you articulate that. If I'm seeming like a little cautious, it's just because I'm not being personally involved in the work about how we're going to set this out. But I think we're agreed on the point, and so let's see what we can do about it.
Good. On that point of agreement, let's leave that there. Brilliant. Moving on to free school meals and business rates. So you confirmed to us in January that you had no expectation of additional funding from business rates. And then between the December and January budgets, you increased your business rate funding assumption by £95 million, which obviously helpfully covered the free school meal cost of about 147. How would you have paid for your universal free school meal commitment if that additional business rate funding had not come in?
I don't normally deal with hypotheticals. I'm not sure if any of those colleagues on the table
well,
do
to
with
be fair,
hypotheticals.
Mr. Mayor, it wasn't a hypothetical because you committed very clearly both in your manifesto and to this committee and to anyone who was prepared to listen that you were absolutely committed to your primary school free school meal programme, so that wasn't a hypothetical. And then the budget numbers, which showed that the money wasn't there, wasn't a hypothetical. So I think it's a reasonable question to ask.
It's clearly hypothetical. You're saying, what would you have done had you not got the money for business rates? That's hypothetical.
But you told us you weren't. I'm sorry. You told us you were expecting to pay for free school meals, and you weren't expecting to receive business rates. And it is a fact that the money was not in the budget. So, what was your plan to pay for that commitment that you clearly made?
My plan was to set out in the budget what I intend to spend over the next year, and that's what I've done.
So you were just crossing your fingers and hoping that the business rates came in?
I don't respond to hypotheticals.
Okay, Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. I think last May you were incredibly clear with the public, as were the Conservatives across London. You committed to ensuring that we continued feeding every primary school child across London with free school meals, whereas the opposition were looking to snatch those plates of food off of children's tables. As part of your funding commitment, you've increased funding this year by £7.5 million to take into account additional costs. Can you outline how this funding will help ensure that we continue with this commitment?
So because it's the first time it's ever happened, we were sort of, putting money aside for contingencies and reserves in the first year. We decided to, per meal, give more than the government gives for reception years 1 and 2. As we now enter a new year, we've got firmer figures in relation to percentage of children that use the free school meals offer. Some still take packed lunches for reasons you'll appreciate. The cost, infrastructure costs, new ovens, kitchens, which we help pay for in the reserves and the contingency. So we've got a better idea in relation to this. So the increase you mentioned actually is us putting into one pot of money reserves and contingencies. So I don't want to give the impression we're putting a lot more additional money. It's putting it into one pot because we think we now will not need the contingencies and reserves we have in the past, because we've got a good system in place now. It's working pretty well, and we know what we're doing.
Because there are some additional, obviously, one-off additional costs, effectively. So that has
sort of things like some schools, because there are more meals being provided, needed support with ovens and cookers or an expansion of their classroom. So we work really closely with the council. I want to thank all 32 councils in the City of London for the way they've worked. They know their schools better than us. They've let us know where there's an issue, and we've responded to that. We've got a good handle now of where we are.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. And I know that the 25,000 children and their parents across Ealing and Hillingdon really appreciate it.
So I know Assemblymember Mahfouz wasn't here for last year's budget process. I'm sure his colleagues will be happy to remind him that the Conservative budget amendment last year did include all of the funding for free school meals. So I'm not quite sure where his line about snatching away plates that he used.
The manifesto
probably
pledge?
went to Hustings.
The manifesto pledge?
or watching the debates on TV. I don't know.
Ask him now if he'll give you a job. Assemblymember Hall, I have next.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, there's one thing that, believe it or not, that we do have in common. Well, at least I mean it. You say it. The safety of Londoners is my top priority. It would absolutely be mine. As you know, it is my passion, making sure that the Metropolitan Police get enough money. I'm asking it in this section to see if there's any more money that you've got. Trust and confidence in the police is as low as it could be. And one thing that gives Londoners confidence is to see police officers walking around. Now, I know you see them all the time because you've got 4 attached to you constantly. But actually having police officers on the street gives Londoners confidence. And we are going to go down in numbers again. And there must be money that you can find from somewhere else to be putting into the Metropolitan Police. It is absolutely vital that they get more money so we don't lose officers off the street.
Can I just check, Chair? The member said no one wants officers going down again. What does she mean by again?
Well, when you first took over, if you remember, the numbers went down from about 32,000, because you've been in charge of this for a very long time, despite the fact that you'd love to talk about Boris. They went right the way down to, I think it was 29,500. Then they came back again, and now we're going back in the wrong direction again under you. That is what I'm talking about.
So I think what you're alluding to is they went down again because the previous government cut in funding by £1.1 billion.
I wouldn't start mentioning the government if I were you. You've got a load in. The last 7 months has been a complete disaster. Businesses in London are going to suffer dreadfully under the national insurance contributions that they're going to have to make for the, as an employer. Although we're all right because they're paying public bodies the extra money. They're not paying businesses that. Well, what I'm saying to you is, can you find more money, please? This is a yes or no. Can you please find more money to put into the Metropolitan Police? Because they need it more than anybody else, in my view.
Well,
yes or no?
After 14 years, I can understand why they don't want to talk about the government. But in March 2010, the last time there was a Labour government, there were 33,260 officers in the Met Police Service. 33,260.
Mr. Mayor,
last time
I'm
there was a
talking about
Labour
you
government.
as the Police and Crime Commissioner under you. It's amazing you mention the government when it suits you to do so. I'm talking about you as the Police and Crime Commissioner. You should make sure they've got enough money. You waste enough money on bicycle ballet, on parties, I believe, at the beach down here. Goodness knows where else London taxpayers' money goes. It should be going into the Metropolitan Police. Yes or no, will you find some more money, please, to put into the Metropolitan Police? That's what Londoners want.
Is it my turn now?
If you're very brief,
Right,
because you've only given us an hour.
So, I'm the first mayor to come here again to do this, right, by the way. Johnson never came, by the way. So before the last Labour government lost the election, there were 33,260 officers. When I became mayor in 2016, there were 31,720. So we have more now than when I became mayor. We'll have more next year than when I became mayor.
We dropped down to 29,000 something. So you can play those games. I watch it all the time because I care about the Metropolitan Police.
I'm really sorry that the member thinks that safety is a game. I don't think it's a game.
No, it's not a game. So put some more money into the Metropolitan Police. We're going to have to finish here, Chairman, because he's going early and others want to come in.
What we also know is that the Met Police is funded 80%. It used to be funded 80% by central government. Because of cuts over the 14 years, that 80% has gone down to 75%. Because of the cuts made by the previous government. What compounds that is the previous mayor didn't fill that hole or try to fill it with council tax. Didn't lobby his government, didn't fill it with council tax. That 19% of funding from City Hall has now gone to 25% because of me using all the levers at my disposal, which they are against me doing so. But also this year, we have the most generous settlement from a government in history. £280 million from the government, additional £40 million from City Hall, the biggest year-on-year increase the Met Police has received in 196 years, but that will not fill 14 years' worth of cots. I know why they're embarrassed talking about the previous government or the previous mayor. We've got to remind Londoners this mess is because they're making.
Assemblymember Roberts, and then I have Assemblymember Polanski, and we have about 2 minutes left.
Thank you. There was a motion debated at plenary last week, I think, where overwhelmingly and cross-party support was given for a budget being set aside in order to fund a potential legal challenge. So not spend, simply hypothecating money in the contingency that we do need to launch a legal challenge. However, you refused to accept that recommendation. Could you explain why?
We don't need to. We have contingencies for legal challenges to be defended or brought. So the last time I supported a legal challenge, we didn't need to have a budget change. You'll appreciate the way from your council budget setting, there are money set aside for those sorts of issues. I'm quite clear. I'll use every tool in the toolkit to stop a third runway at Heathrow Airport, and that may include a legal challenge. So let's wait and see what Heathrow come up with. But I can reassure him, as one of our cross-party and local government allies in a sort of challenge, we will make sure we have the resources to support that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Senator Polanski.
Very briefly, just wanted to ask about Oxford Street. You spoke last time that there was a big appetite from private business about this and you couldn't breach confidences. I get that to a point, but at what point does this become very transparent in terms of, will you lay out which businesses are donating what and what they're getting in return for that, or not donating? But
No, we get it. I mean, listen, this is the mess the previous mayor got in with the Garden Bridge.
Right.
You've got to be quite transparent in these sorts of things for obvious reasons and stuff. So what this budget does is set out some money to get the process going with the Development Corporation, with the road being designated. My commitment to the Assembly and to London is I'll make sure we make public any help that we receive financially in relation to this project for the reasons that we know it's important to do so.
It's great to hear. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll make it precisely 11 o'clock, which is the time that we were due to finish. How amazingly well-timed we are. Well done, everyone. Well, I can only take part of the credit because I can't. Okay, so could I thank our panel of guests? Thank you very much for attending today and for their answers to our questions. The committee has a few more items of business to deal with, but you're welcome to leave the chamber. So can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? And can we also delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Great. Now we circle back to our little bits of housekeeping that we might have done at the beginning. So item 3, membership of the committee. Can I ask the committee to note the changes to its membership which were agreed by the London Assembly at its annual meeting on the 23rd of January? Item 4, can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December 2024, the 12th of December 2024, the 17th of December 2024 to be signed by me as correct records? Summary list of actions. Can I ask the committee to note the completed and ongoing actions from its previous meetings? Item 6, can I ask the committee to note the recent actions taken by the chairman of the Budget and Performance Committee under delegated authority following consultation with party group lead members, namely to agree the committee's various letters regarding the Greater London Authority Budget 2025-26 as attached at appendices 1 to 3. I should have taken a deeper breath at the start of that sentence, shouldn't I? Item 7, can I ask the committee to note the response from the Mayor of London to its letter on the Budget and Green Finance Fund as attached at Appendix 1, and the response from the Mayor of London to its letter on the 2025-26 budget process as attached at Appendix 2. Item 9, the Budget and Performance, we're nearly there. Budget Performance Committee Work Programme. Can we note the committee's work programme and meeting dates? Which brings me to date of next meeting. The next meeting of the committee will be held on the 19th of March 2025 at 10 a.m. here in the chamber in City Hall. I have no urgent business today, so that concludes today's meeting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.